Okay, so in Standard 11D, your job is to describe Ellis and Angel Islands. We're talking about immigrants during this time. We'll talk about where immigrants came from over the course of U.S. history in the next slide, but, we need to look at where immigrants are coming from in the late 1800s, what their influence is on the economy, how they influence politics, and what they bring and how they change culture in the United States. Okay, so here we go. During the colonial period of the United States, so we're talking about, when the colonies are kind of founded, immigrants were coming from England, Scotland, Germany, and France, all right? So a lot of Western Europe is what we saw. After the American Revolution, and again, immigrants is a term that you have in your vocabulary, so it's highlighted in pink. You need to make sure that you write that down. But after the American Revolution, your immigrants are coming mostly from Ireland and Germany. Mostly, okay? The big change in immigrants really is going to be after the Civil War. Okay, so prior to the Civil War, most of your immigrants are coming from Western Europe and the northern parts of Europe. After the Civil War, though, a lot of your immigrants are coming from Eastern and Southern Europe. So they're not coming from England and Scotland and Germany and France. They're coming from, the eastern side. You're talking about, Greece and Czechoslovakia and all of these countries, China and Russia, okay? The U.S. is going to have to find a way to deal with this big influx of people, and they're going to have to figure out, what do we do with them? What's our impression of them? How are we going to approach them? So most of your immigrants during this period are coming in because they're fleeing civil unrest. They're looking for a better life. They lived in poverty, and most of them don't speak English. So that's going to cause a lot of animosity when they start to interact with Americans that have been here for a while. Okay. They also tend to settle in large groups where others are like them are located. So, you tend to gravitate towards people who are like-minded okay? And when all these immigrants start, looking for people that are like them, people that are from their country, they start to create neighborhoods that, really contain just people that are like them. So they kind of stand out. They don't blend in or mesh well with the rest of American society. They almost stick out like a sore thumb. So that's going to create a little more animosity between your people who have been in America for a while and then these new immigrants. The immigration stations that are set up, so again, this is important. Like we think letters are your vocabulary words. The yellow is your notes, but that doesn't mean don't write anything else down. Ellis Island, so let's talk about why we have two different immigration stations. Ellis Island is located on the East Coast in New York Harbor, and Angel Island is located on the West Coast out by California. Ellis Island opens in around the 1890s, but those are all of your immigrants that are coming from Europe, okay? They're going to come through Ellis Island. And immigrants, this is a really lengthy process. You don't hop onto Ellis Island, go through a checkpoint, and then you're in America. Inspection process, they had to inspect them for chronic disease, lice, other kinds of things. That took anywhere from 3 to 7 hours. Sometimes it took days or weeks that they were camped out there. Immigrants were also asked a series of 29 questions. They checked for things like literacy. They checked for things like how well do they speak English, or how are they going to be productive in the United States. Okay, and some immigrants were sent back to their native countries, usually for diseases that they brought with them. Angel Island, again, is located on the West Coast out by California. What country is nearest to the West Coast of the United States? China. So your Chinese immigrants, your Asian immigrants came through Angel Island. And to give you an idea, just this 30-year period between 1910 and 1940, about 1 million immigrants were processed through Angel Island. A lot of Americans had a strong resistance to Chinese immigrants. They didn't like that they were coming in and they would take lower wage jobs. because they really were just trying to make a living. This is going to lead to legislation that's passed called the Chinese Exclusion Act. More on that to come later. But the Chinese were hired to work on the railroads mostly, and you saw that in the video that we watched when they were laying the tracks, that the Chinese were really the only ones who would work with the nitroglycerin. People felt that they were expendable, so that's the job that they would give them. With this huge influx of immigrants, you're going to start to see a rise in a nativist movement where people who have been in America for quite some time or second or third generation are going to start targeting immigrants through violence, through acts of hatred, excluding them from jobs and things like that. All right, so let's kind of finish up immigrants. The impact of immigrants on the United States. Look, I'm going to tell you the impact on immigrants. Look, they're coming to a whole new country. They're learning new jobs. People don't like them, and they're treated very poorly. But what do the immigrants bring to the United States? Well, here's the thing. With this huge influx of people, cities are going to become overcrowded. That's going to lead to increased problems of disease and crime. Again, write down the stuff in yellow. Okay, that's important to know. But disease is going to go up, especially when you have overpopulated areas, people living so close together, sharing homes together. I mean, you might have 3 families living in one home, and that wasn't unusual. Kids sharing beds, and sanitation is not necessarily wonderful during this time. The economy is going to grow because there's an increased demand for agricultural products like food and produce. And then there's an increased demand for manufactured goods. So, more jobs are being created. New cultural items are going to be available because these immigrants are bringing with them their culture, music that they like, different types of foods, different forms of expression or art. They're going to bring with them newer forms of education and literature pieces. So, things really are changing in the United States. Again, the nativist population is growing, right? As the immigrant numbers are going to grow and their influence grows, so did the view of immigrants destroying American culture, which that's one thing that you need to kind of consider. What really was American culture at the time? I mean, we have immigrants coming all through our history, so really what is American culture? That's something to consider. Nativists saw that immigrants were destroying that culture, but they're adding to it, and that really is, an individual perspective. Poll taxes and literacy taxes are going to be used again to keep immigrants from voting or from, participating in government.